From plans to send students back to school this fall, to the coronavirus outbreak, to unemployment, to early voting, I speak exclusively with State Representative Russell Ott for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. State Representative Russell Ott, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thank you, Quintin. It's great to be here. I've told you a million times that I've been looking forward to this interview. I feel like you're not really getting anything done until you've had an interview with Quintin. So thank you for having me on. And Quintin, thank you for all that you do for the Low Country. Thank you for the hard work that you put in to keep everyone kind of connected on what's going on in the Low Country area, and also, quite frankly, across the state. So just thank you for all that you do.
You're very welcome anytime. And I know, obviously, you are a state representative, obviously, for the 93rd District of South Carolina. And obviously, that's Calhoun, Orangeburg, and parts of Lexington counties. Who is State Representative Russell Ott these days?
Oh, gosh. These days, we're just trying to survive. Working on the farm, kind of been involved with agriculture my entire life in some form or fashion. But we have a row crop farm in Calhoun County and parts of Orangeburg County. And so that keeps us very busy this time of year. So things are looking good from that aspect. I'm also a dad. So, that clearly is a big part of my life, and trying to figure out what things are going to look like when the kids go back to school in a couple of weeks. I know that's weighing heavily on a lot of parents' minds all across the state right now. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so, I think I'm just like everyone else. We're just trying to get through this very challenging time in our state's history and our life. And hopefully very soon things will get back to normal.
As a matter of fact, Governor McMaster recently said on Twitter, quote, "We must give parents the choice in how they want their children educated, whether that is sending them back to school for in-person learning or keeping them home for virtual learning. They should be able to make that choice with confidence." Let me ask you this, Representative Ott. What choice do you have the most confidence in right now?
Yeah, I have the most confidence in allowing the people that do this every single day to make the decisions that are best for their school districts and their schools. And I think that's what you're seeing all across the state right now. Is you're seeing innovation from school boards, from school administration, and from teachers to try to again get through this very challenging time. We're not trying to say that whatever is going to happen here early on in our school years is hopefully going to last throughout the year. Hopefully we'll be back to normal. Hopefully we'll be back to 5 days in-person instruction very, very soon. But I think that every school and every district is different, and they're having to do the very best they can with what they have to work with. And so I've been a proponent of allowing the school districts to make that choice for themselves. And we've got a lot of different approaches. I talked with the State Department of Education actually this morning. We've got 15 school districts that are going, that are offering a full 5-day face-to-face instruction opportunity for their kids. We've got 40 that are starting with a hybrid, which means there will be some virtual learning and there will also be some in-person learning. And we've got 12 districts. Calhoun County, where I'm from, is one of those districts that are going to start fully virtually to start with, and then hopefully move to something different in September. And we're still waiting on about 14 school districts to get their plans approved or submitted. The hurricane that we've just been dealing with has affected Horry County. And so that's kind of pushed them back a little bit, and they're trying to get their plans taken care of. But it's across the board, and I've just got faith in our districts to do what's best. But at the end of the day, it's all about trying to accomplish safety. It's trying to make sure that our teachers stay safe, and it's trying to make sure that our bus drivers, our cafeteria workers, and most importantly, obviously, our kids, right, have the safest opportunity to learn in the best way that they can possibly learn for a short period of time until we can get back to normal.
You talked earlier about those innovations that the school districts usually have. What innovations does the state have right now?
Well, one of the things I'm most proud of is clearly through this situation, we've seen our shortcomings when it comes to broadband. particularly in the areas that I represent, Quintin, the rural parts of South Carolina. You know, we've known for the last several years that we've been dealing with a broadband issue. There's no doubt about that, unfortunately. And we've been trying to move towards getting better connectivity, but that hasn't been the case. And so when we've gone virtual, you know, when we had that condensed period of time where all kids were trying to learn online at the end of the last school year, we certainly saw that we had some major problems. So I'm glad that through the CARES Act funding from the federal government, the General Assembly appropriated up to $50 million a couple of months ago to try to get these hotspots. I know you've probably heard about them, but for these families that don't have broadband connections, we've deployed through the Department of Administration, the State Department of Education, and our local districts. We've got thousands upon thousands of hotspots going into homes to try to help kids get that connectivity they need to be able to learn online if that's what their districts are doing. So I'm proud of that. You know, but again, just the innovation of trying to figure out the best way to teach in some of these different situations. And I think that's one of the biggest things I want parents to understand is don't expect, when we say virtual learning as we head into this new school year, I don't want parents to think that that's going to be what they experienced at the tail end of the last school year. I've talked with lots of administrators and tons of principals, and that was a stopgap measure. I mean, we were hit broadside with the virus, and clearly, you know, I commend the governor for taking the steps to kind of shut schools down at that particular time to try to get ahead of the virus. And, you know, but at the same time, it left teachers and administrators really with not a lot of time whatsoever to get ready for that. So it was an emergency act. You know, the teachers were just trying to do the best they could last year. They've been preparing all summer long. Administrators have been preparing all summer long to try to be able to give a high quality curriculum through a virtual setting to the students as we head into this new year.
And you talked earlier about some of those major problems that you had towards the end of April. What were there exactly in Calhoun, Orangeburg, and of course Lexington counties?
Yeah, you know, I think statewide also, not just Calhoun County, the biggest concern that I had was keeping up with our kids. You know, I think that we took for granted the fact that we're able to put eyes, we're able to talk with our kids each and every day. You know, school is about learning. There's no doubt about that. But what I've also learned is it's much, much more than just teachers teaching kids. It's also about, you know, teachers being able to listen to their students and be able to understand some of the problems that may be going on inside the homes, some of the issues that they may be dealing with personally. I mean, really, our teachers and our guidance counselors wear all kinds of different hats on a day-to-day basis. And so one of the biggest concerns that I certainly had was the number of students that we lost contact with statewide, you know, through that particular period and over the summer. So I agree, you know, it's vitally important that we get back to being able to see them, being able to talk with them, being able to kind of figure out what's going on in those each individual settings and those home settings to try to be able to give them the support and help that they might need.
And in Calhoun County, how many students have been lost as far as contact?
Yeah, you know, we haven't had percentage wise, I don't think the problem that has been maybe statewide. We've had some great teachers that have done some different things with going out, following the school buses. You know, I was proud of Calhoun County, like many other districts. They provided breakfast and lunch to the students during the school year, regardless of whether they could come in. We put them on buses and sent them around the district. And a lot of days, the teachers were getting in their cars, following the school buses as they were dropping off the meals. So I don't know an exact number, but I did continue to talk with the administration. And you know, there were some, but it wasn't a high percentage.
And I know you talked earlier about the virtual learning. Would a virtual until safe and modified instruction approach be ideal right now?
You know, again, Quintin, I think that's what, you know, each individual district has to make a decision for themselves on. You know, I certainly am supportive of that. And, you know, again, one of the reasons I'm supportive of that is because that's what Accelerate SC, the task force that we put together, recommended. And so, you know, I'm a proponent of, if you're going to put groups together and you're going to task them with doing a job and then they go and do that job, I think it's important that we at least listen. And that was one of the recommendations that came out of Accelerate Ed was to, let's go with a at least virtual option until these numbers start going down. And, that's certainly what Calhoun County and Orangeburg have decided to go. They're heeding the advice of those task force, and that's the plan that they have put in place right now.
And you talked earlier, obviously, about guidance counselors and teachers. Let me take you to the Post-Courier article that Jamie Lovegrove just wrote yesterday. And he talks about many SC schools may be dealing with a pandemic without a full-time nurse. School districts across the state are scrambling to hire nurses, a necessity as classrooms reopen amid a pandemic. But they're competing against each other as well as hospitals that pay much, much more. Let me ask you this, Representative Ott. How much will the state be willing to hire, and how much is this going to cost the average taxpayer for full-time nurses?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that's kind of a unknown at this particular time, Quintin. But I would, basically based off of that scenario that you just laid out, it's not just nurses. I mean, that is you just described exactly what goes on day to day in districts with teachers as well. With teachers, with our more fluent districts being able to offer teachers more money to be able to come and teach in those districts than maybe some of the less affluent rural districts across our state. So it's a problem. There's no doubt about it. I think one of the things as a policymaker that I'm always trying to make sure of is that we balance the burden that we're putting on the taxpayer with the benefit that they're receiving for the taxes that they're paying. That's always the balancing act that you're trying to find the sweet spot on. I know that's a very important issue to a lot of folks, but at the end of the day, we've got to have those school nurses. I mean, more than ever, probably we're going to be dealing with, a lot of kids that, they're going to have a cough or they're going to have a sneeze. And, I can only imagine the first thing that's going to pop into their heads and the heads of their parents. So we've got to make sure that we've got the PPE, the protective equipment for those nurses and those teachers. And again, it's just a challenge. We're gonna have problems that pop up, Quintin. As we head into this new school year, there's going to be things that we can predict are going to happen and things that we simply can't predict that are going to happen. And we're going to have to be very flexible. We're going to have to be fluid in our approach, and we're going to have to address the problems as they come to the best of our ability. And all I would, ask is for parents to understand that this is a very unique and challenging time. This is not normal, and hopefully very soon we're going to be able to get back to normal. But, it's just like any other thing. If any other issue that we've ever had to overcome as a state or as a country, if we're going to be able to overcome those things, we have to do it together. We have to all pull in the same direction and understand that there's going to be sacrifices that have to be made by all to get through this to the best of our ability.
And the article goes on to say this: as of late May, about 130 schools had no nurse on campus, and an additional 75 shared a nurse with another school, according to a survey by the State Department of Education. How many nurses are actually needed in schools such as Calhoun County?
Yeah, again, I think that's dependent upon what you're dealing with. On a normal year, maybe having a nurse per school perhaps would be, or a nurse per district would be sufficient. But I don't know if that's going to be the case this year. And, again, what I really want to do is not say that this is the number of nurses that we need. I want to talk with the folks that are on the ground in those particular areas. I want them to be able to give those answers. And then I think as a state legislator, it's incumbent upon us to be able to go and figure out a way, hopefully, to provide the resources for them to have it. That was no different than when we had school resource officers as a need. We identified that as a need across the state. And so this is going to be a need that we have to address in a very challenging year. We go back into session probably in about a month.
Right.
And we don't have a budget yet, Quintin, as you are, I'm sure, are well aware. We have yet to pass a budget for the current fiscal year that we're in. We are right now operating under a continuing resolution that we passed earlier on in the year to make sure that state government was going to be able to continue to run smoothly forward. but that's going to be a challenge. Is, we had a large revenue projection in surplus that we thought we were going to be able to have to work with early in the year, and that has evaporated. From every indication from the BEA, the vast majority of that new money is going to be gone. So when we go back to try to craft a budget, we're going to be working with a lot less dollars than we thought we were going to be able to work with earlier in the year. So, all of these different aspects are going to be requesting money, and it's going to be up to us, and we're going to have a very tough time, and we're going to have to work together to figure out the best way to appropriate those dollars.
What was that new money? How much was that in total?
Before
Yes, sir.
the coronavirus, before, I think it was somewhere around $1.7 billion.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, don't hold me to that number exactly, Quintin. But the last I heard, I think we're expecting 400,000, which is a drastic decrease from what the original number was actually going to be.
And I know, obviously, State Superintendent of Education Molly Spearman says some schools are small, and she also obviously think a part-time person can cover. Maybe that would work before the pandemic, but she says, I'm not sure that that's going to work right now. She also says, quote, everybody needs somebody there who will be in charge of taking kids' temperatures. Let me ask you this, Representative Ott. How many of those part-time nurses would you secure for Calhoun, Orangeburg, and Lexington counties?
Yeah, again, Quintin, you want as many as you can possibly get your hands on. There's no doubt about that. You want to make sure that you have enough to do it. I don't know. Again, you laid it out very well.
Okay.
With, every school district is going to be trying to find these nurses to be able to come in and do these types of things. I have not heard that the temperature was going to be taken each and every day. But if that's the case, the question is going to have to be asked is, do you have to have a nurse to be able to take the temperature, or can the teacher be able to take the temperature? And then that leads, well, are the teachers going to feel comfortable taking the temperature? And then you got to have protocols, Quintin, if the temperature is high. So, I wish there were easy answers. I really do. But unfortunately, each question that gets answered probably usually raises another question that has to be answered. So it's going to be a challenge as we continue to move through this situation. But again, the key is going to be communication and cooperation. And it's going to be incumbent that we work with our local school districts, listen to what they have. And I would, certainly say that the districts need to be realistic in their expectations, and only ask for exactly what they feel like they have to be able to accomplish the job. And that's not always the case. A lot of folks understand that a lot of times the ask is a lot higher than what the realistic need is, and we just can't, that's not what we're going to be able to do this year. Everyone's going to have to understand that we're working with limited resources, and we're going to have to do what we have to do just to get through.
Let me turn to the coronavirus, and let me ask you this, testing versus infection. How many testing cases are there in your county, and how many are actually infection cases?
I haven't seen the latest numbers, Quintin. I can tell you that Calhoun County, statewide, comparatively speaking, was doing very well early on. We didn't have the number of cases early on, but then clearly as things started to ramp up, we started seeing numbers in Calhoun County go up with that as well. So I haven't seen the latest numbers, but I would say it's very consistent with where we are across the state. And it's just right now it's just too high. When you look at where we sit across the country, comparatively speaking, and I know that everybody, depending on which particular path you want to take or argument you want to make, there's a number out there that you can use to make that argument. Unfortunately, I hate, quite frankly, that we're in this such polarizing environment where so many of these health issues have become political issues, and they certainly should not be that way. Unfortunately, that's kind of where we are. but it's pretty clear to me that the numbers are higher than we want them to be. The deaths clearly have been higher than we want them to be, and we just want this thing we want to be able to get this thing under control. And unfortunately, there's going to be some things that we all have to do across the state to be able to get this under control so that we can get back to normal and get these numbers down.
And what's the average age of people in your district with infections? And is that average getting lower?
No, I haven't seen that. I would have to talk with DHEC to get that particular number. But again, everything that I've seen, Calhoun County and Orangeburg and the part of Lexington that I represent has been tracking along with the rest of the state. Unfortunately, that does mean that, we have a very vulnerable population that is out there. African Americans, Quintin, have been disproportionately affected, by this disease, unfortunately. And I think it's shed some light on some disparities that we have across the state. And clearly, obviously, is hitting the older population worse. The thing that scares me that I talk with folks about is we don't know how this is going to impact a lot of folks that contract it later on in life. There's so many unanswered questions that we just don't know the answer to, unfortunately, which is why it's even more incumbent upon us to do what it takes to drive those numbers lower right now.
And I know this might be a tricky question here, but it's a question that everybody's been asking. But what are the numbers for the public health lab backlog, and what are the actual results?
Say that one more time for me, Quintin.
Yeah, what are the numbers for the public health lab backlog, and what are the actual results?
You mean as far as the backlog on getting the test results back?
Yes, sir. And particularly for your county.
Yeah, again, it's a lack of test kits. There's an anti-agent apparently that is in short supply. It's only produced in certain areas. So, I have heard that there's a lot of folks that have been tested, and it takes a long time for them to actually get their test results back. And that's unfortunate. I think that, if you talk with a lot of folks, clearly testing is a big deal for us to be able to try to get ahead of outbreaks, to be able to know where those hot spots are starting to occur. So the testing is critical in trying to make sure that we know where we need to send additional resources.
Any hot spots in Calhoun County or Lexington or Orangeburg?
Well, Lexington has been a hot spot. There's no doubt about it. Numbers in Lexington County have been running, higher than other counties across the state. Richland County, which is right next door as well, has certainly seen numbers that are higher than other parts of the state. Orangeburg has kind of, I think, statistically been, right there along with everyone else.
Okay. And let me ask you this too. I know obviously Daniel Brownstein, who's a Democratic candidate for House District 112 over here on Oliver Palms and South Lens Island, parts of Mount Pleasant, said this on Twitter, quote, "A new poll finds South Carolina split about Henry McMaster's handling of the pandemic, with 46% supporting, 46% opposing, and 8% undecided. He says this, quote, "I believe it is time for a statewide mass law and other decisive action." And I just talked with State Representative Nancy Mace, who basically says, hey, I'm not going to vote for that if that comes about. What bill will you draft right now, Representative Ott, in the House if you could?
Yeah, that's a great question, Quintin. There's no doubt about it. I would support there being a mandate on masks right now, statewide. I think the frustration that I've heard from the constituents that I represent, and frankly from people all across the state, is just the smorgasbord. The not clear direction that our leadership has taken us throughout this particular this issue. It's kind of been one day we're over here, the next day we're over here on the other side of things. One day we're telling our local governments that you can't pass ordinances. Very early on, you'll remember that a lot of our coastal counties were wanting to pass ordinances to try to keep folks from flooding into their particular areas. Well, then we didn't want local governments to take action. But now, apparently we're encouraging local governments to pass the mask ordinances themselves. So it's been confusing. I would say certainly that's been a frustration of a lot of folks. I certainly believe that, regardless of who you talk to, the clear consensus is that masks help slow down the spread of this virus, which is what we are trying to accomplish to make sure happens. Now, I'll say this. I've been very proud of a lot of South Carolinians that I've seen in the different places that I've been. I do think that the vast majority of South Carolinians are heeding the recommendations and the advice of healthcare officials in wearing the mask and trying to stay socially distant. But there's still a lot of folks out there that aren't. And I think as we head into a season of school, as we head into a season of colleges trying to get back together, there's going to be a lot more opportunities for folks to get back together in large groups and large gatherings. So, I appreciate the governor trying to encourage folks to wear masks, but I just think that requiring that at this particular point would certainly help drive those numbers down. And even if it didn't, Quintin, for those folks that say that will not work, I think that is worth a try. It's to me, we require that people wear a seatbelt when they get into their cars and they drive around. And we've seen that, requiring those seatbelts have driven down the number of deaths over the years in motor vehicle accidents. And, I could list, I understand that folks think that's a personal decision that they should be able to make. And I understand that, but this is something altogether different. I mean, literally, if someone has it and they're out there not doing the things that they need to do to keep the spread from happening, then that is affecting all of us. And so, that kind of goes outside of the bounds of your own personal preference when you start impacting the health of others. So it's a challenge. There's no doubt about it. And I try to listen to everyone's opinions. I certainly try to listen and understand where people are coming from. And I know that people have very passionate thoughts about this on both sides. But, I think we all can agree that we just want to put this behind us as soon as possible so that we can move forward and get on with our lives. I am of the opinion that for us to be able to do that as quickly as possible, then there's going to have to be some actions that we probably require people to take.
If you could draft that bill, what exactly would be the language?
That's speculative, Quintin. That's why you're such a good interviewer and reporter. You try to nail people down, and I respect that. But frankly, drafting legislation is one of the hardest things in the world. And that's what I tell people all the time is that it would be great to be able to say that this is exactly the way I would want a bill to pass. And a lot of times you do draft legislation that way, but very rarely does it ever end up passing. And I think, Quintin, it's very hard. We have to be realistic at the same time. We're sitting here in August. We're going to go back into session probably next month for a very limited purpose. There will be folks that try to introduce all kinds of different legislation relating to probably everything under the sun, including probably making the Carolina Clemson football game continue forward this year, and so that we don't miss it. But frankly, and honestly and truthfully, the vast majority of those bills that get introduced aren't going to go anywhere. Because we are there for a very specific reason that the leadership is going to lay out for us, and we're going to try to get that accomplished. So, just having a wish list and throwing something on paper, that's why I guess at the end of the day, I do think it's incumbent upon the governor to take these steps, because a legislator, passing an initiative like that, the level of steps that it has to go through to be able to be a bill that gets passed. And I don't know, this isn't a long term. This isn't going to be a law that is going to stay into effect, years down the road. That's why, legislatively speaking, I don't think that would be the appropriate manner. That's why, this needs to come from the governor's office, because it's a temporary situation for a state of emergency that we're currently dealing with.
And I want to sidestep just a tad bit, because I'm wondering this too, Representative Ott. With the COVID situation affecting the state economy in certain ways, how has it affected revenues in your district that are needed for projects such as transportation?
Again, Quentin, we're unfortunately, we're going to find that out very soon. I think certainly it's driven those revenues down. We haven't gotten those final numbers yet, but I can tell you that there's a lot of folks that are struggling. There's a lot of folks. There's business owners out there that are struggling right now. There's folks out there that are out of work by no choice of their own. That's why I continue to hate to hear folks say, "Well, we're paying people to sit home that would ordinarily be working," and that's that again, that kind of goes back, Quentin. We tend to put everyone into buckets sometimes, which is very easy to do. Put large groups of people and individuals into the same bucket instead of drilling down and looking at things from an individual viewpoint. Of course, there's some people out there, that may be in that situation, but the vast majority of folks that currently find themselves on the unemployment rolls want to get back to work. They just can't go back to work right now. And I promise you, I would not want to be in their situations of having to get up every single morning and quite frankly, not know how they're going to get those bills paid. We've got issues coming like, eviction notices, eviction rates, Quentin. We've got a lot of problems that are starting to build up and to mount. And we need to really start addressing a lot of them together. But, again, revenues in my particular district are certainly going to be down. Revenues in districts all across the state are going to be down. And appropriating and allocating those dollars are going to be very tough.
And what are the top projects in your district at this point?
Well, again, when the project, a lot of times local projects get, identified at the local level. So from county council and our municipal town councils, certainly. But from the statewide level, yeah, DOT projects, road issues, again, funding from the state, in my opinion, to make sure that, we can give step increases to our teachers is going to be paramount. That's one of the things that we didn't do in the continuing resolution, but trying to have enough money from the state to our school districts to be able to attract and retain teachers is going to be a big deal. And I know that's going to be the case all across the state. So those big ticket issues right now, I think is going to be where we continue to try to focus, DOT, DHEC, the State Department of Education. But even when you start talking about places like corrections, I can't tell you the number of folks that I continuously have conversations with that have loved ones that, that are in jail at this particular point or in prison. And, Brian Sterling does a fantastic job with the Department of Corrections with the limited resources that we give him. It's unfortunate that we shortchanged that particular agency right along with a lot of other agencies over the years. But, folks don't think about those types of agencies, but the Department of Natural Resources, you go right on down the list, and we've got state agencies, we've got, folks that are trying to do the mission that we've laid out for those particular agencies. And then they're going to have to do it with less dollars this year.
You talk about those less dollars. You talk about some of these departments being shortchanged. Is the Department of Unemployment shortchanged? And if you could right now, could you ask for some sort of increase in unemployment and benefits until the federal government steps back in?
Yeah, we certainly could. There's no doubt about that. If we were in session, then we could certainly debate whether or not that was something that would need to be done. I'm certainly hopeful that the federal government is going to be able to come back and again, Quentin, we're just trying to get folks through this particular situation. There's no intent on trying to make this some type of long-term situation for folks, and I don't think they want it to be long-term. Again, the people I talk with, they want to get back to work, and hopefully very soon we'll be able to get them back to work. We just have to, give people a shoulder to lean on at this particular point to try to make sure that they get through this trying time.
And I know currently, I think the unemployment weekly pay right now, because of the federal money being left out is like, I think 188. What would you increase that by right now?
Yeah, again, I think you're right. I think the maximum someone ultimately ends up drawing is around $300, depending on the job that they actually work. All I can tell you, Quintin, is I think if folks really sit there and think about trying to get by on $300 a week, individually, much less with a mother, that, a single mom that might have one or two kids, that's very trying. So, I think it has to be certainly a two-pronged approach to be able to try to get folks back to work, trying to get our businesses back with their feet underneath them. But also making sure that we give those folks that are currently unemployed what they need to get through, until that happens. But again, Quentin, I just, then I reiterate, right? This all goes back to why we're dealing with this issue. And that is because of the coronavirus and its spread. And so if we want to try to find a solution to all of these problems that we're talking about, priority number one needs to be stopping the spread and the transmission of the virus. That is the root cause of all of these problems that we're dealing with right now. And so, I want us to be focused on, as a state, on trying to get those numbers down as quickly as possible. Once we start getting those numbers down, then, we have kids going back to school. We have a lot of these restrictions being lifted, and folks getting back to a sense of normalcy. And then things are starting to pick back up. And, that's where we need to be trying to stay focused on getting. Now, clearly, in the short term, there's things that we're going to have to do to try to get people through, but we can't lose focus of what the cure for this is, and that is to try to get the numbers for the virus as low as we possibly can, to a manageable position.
And let me turn to the topic of early voting. WIS said this recently, quote, while each state runs its own process, those mail ballots can take longer to count. You said this on your Twitter account, quote, which is why the General Assembly needs to allow for early counting of mail-in ballots. What would be that ideal time period, and what statutory requirements would be put in place?
Thanks for that, Quentin. You bring up a great point. Again, for me, it goes back to listening to our election commissions, our local election commissions, and our state election commission. And they themselves have asked for the ability to be able to start counting those absentee ballots the Friday before the election. They feel like that will give them enough headway to be able to get everything counted. I mean, I think it's clear that, we're gonna have a large number of absentee ballots cast, probably more than have ever been cast in a general election in the history of elections this year. So, to be able to say that they can't start counting those absentee ballots until the day of the election, I think certainly is unrealistic and puts too much of a burden on them. Now, unfortunately, we haven't given very clear direction to the election commissions at this particular point. We've had that opportunity, and it's been one of the things that I've been frustrated at is, we allowed, we during the primary elections, we said that, yes, you can, if COVID is a reason that you can vote absentee. We put that in place during the primary elections, and I think, we understood that we were going to have an issue with poll workers. We were going to combine a lot of polling places, and that was going to lead to problems, which was one of the reasons that we added that on as a reason for you to be able to vote absentee. Why we didn't just go ahead and know that we were still probably going to be dealing with this to a certain extent in November. We could have set that up for the general election then. We could have set it up for the general election a few weeks ago when we were in session again one day, but we chose not to. And so here we are, probably heading into September, a couple of months away from the election, and our election commissions don't have the guidance that they need to start preparing, which to me is just frankly unacceptable. That's just something that we should be ashamed of as a General Assembly, for allowing that, that uncertainty around, an election that is going to be this big, this fundamental value of voting in the democratic process, I think it's unfortunate. We're only one of a handful of states that don't have this in place heading into November, and unfortunately, that's just an embarrassment for us not to be prepared the way we should be at this particular point.
Why the politics with politics?
What's that?
Why the politics with politics?
Why the politics?
With politics when it comes to this mail-in debate.
What politics? I'm missing the question, Quintin.
Yes, sir. Okay, when you talk about this debate on why, with the opportunity the General Assembly had to make this happen, and the election commissions obviously are not even getting the guidance that they need, why is there politics with this politics?
Yeah, that I got you now. I don't know. I think it's unfortunate. I would love to be able to ask that exact same question to some of the leadership in the General Assembly. Again, as being a member of the Democratic Party, I don't understand what goes on with some of those decisions, but clearly it is political. I don't know why, but I don't think anyone could say it's not. No one's given a legitimate reason that I've heard, or even a reason at all, as to why we haven't taken this up at this particular point. So, Quintin, frankly, it's that's kind of the world we live in now. It's a hyper partisanship world, it seems like, and I think that's unfortunate. I have never been one to really put that much stock into partisanship. I don't think it serves the people I represent well, or the best that I possibly can by getting into all of that. I'm an issues person, and I want to know what the issue is, and then I want to sit down with people that truly want to find a solution to that problem, and let's get the job done. And this is going to be a problem. We know it's going to be an issue. So for the life of me, I don't understand why it always devolves to that. But I think that's why people get very frustrated, with government and politicians and politics as a whole, because folks always see this partisanship bickering that always occurs, and it's frustrating to me as well.
State Representative Russell Ott, thank you so much for your time, and again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you so much, Quintin. I hope you have me back on one day, bud.
Certainly, I definitely will.
Take care.
You likewise.